Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome back to the Narrowcast. I am hooked up on everything right here. Hold on. Okay, I'm your host, Josh, and I am here with you might recognize him if you've been following us for a little bit. The first ever. This is history. We're making history today. The first repeat guest, the only person that's ever been on the show before. So, but before we dive into it, we'll let you kind of reintroduce yourself a little bit too for anyone that's not hasn't been around, because probably the last time you were on, we're maybe sitting at, if I literally had to guess, 15 to 20 subscribers. And just as of this morning, we passed 600. So we're at 609 right now, which is wild, because I remember telling Lindsay, I was like, when we hit 100, we'll try to do this. And when we hit 500, it'll be, and now we're just blowing past it. And it's like, okay. So if you guys aren't subscribed, you hit that subscribe button, help us get to 1,000 and spread the channel around YouTube, because, like, YouTube needs more Jesus. And the more you interact, the more it sends it out to people and says, hey, you might also like this. So trick that algorithm into being an evangelist. So yeah, Branson, it's been about 2 hours since I've seen you. How's it been?
Yeah, man, long time no see. It's good to be back on. Yeah, for those of you who don't know, my name is Branson Schrader. I am a husband to my wife Emily, a father to my two little boys, Leo and Fulton. I know Josh primarily through our parish, Christ the King, in Tulsa, and we've just been walking together in our faith for nearing 2 years, which has been such a joy. So I have a role here at the parish, kind of doing ministry, small group ministry, particularly families and couples. And so, yeah, just thrilled to be back on, Josh. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no problem. And before we jump into the topic and everything, I wanted to let you guys know, if you've been following along, we typically do the Saint Draft, the famous Saint Draft. It's not going anywhere. We're going to continue to do it, but you guys can go back and watch. We did an episode on the little way of evangelization. Watch our Saint Draft. It was pretty great. But
Yeah,
we're going to be
cool.
taking on the Hallow app challenge. So if you guys don't have the Hallow app, they're not a sponsor of this show by any means, but we love them enough to say it anyway, that you guys should check it out. Tons of different prayer stuff, but we're going to be taking on, there's a trivia question with 5 questions, and we're going to see how we do. So I don't know. I always feel really smart one week, and then the next week or the next day, you're just like, wow, like I know nothing. So,
Yes,
mhm.
I love
But
it.
yeah, so today we want to talk about testimony, which is perfect because we've got John Edwards next week, just a guy in the pew. If you guys are That Man Is You people, he was a guest speaker last year, and he's got a beautiful testimony. He's got an awesome story of overcoming some great great adversities and stuff. And there's power in testimony. Now, not everyone's going to have these wild transformations, wild everything. I didn't. But we're going to be kind of just talking about the gist of kind of testimonies and sharing your testimonies. But what do you think? You say we should probably start with, like, why testimony?
I think, yeah, I mean, I
Yeah.
think that's a good place to start with most things is kind of asking the question, why? Why do we share? Why ought we share our testimonies? And I came up with a few points.
Hmm.
I'm sure there's plenty more anybody else could bring to the table.
Yeah.
But I have a few points that I think are important, when considering why to share our story.
Hmm.
Um, the first, I think, I mean, we don't have to spend much time on this one, but Christ tells us to, and as Christians, especially as baptized Christians, we are baptized into the work of evangelization.
Hmm.
It's not an optional thing as a Christian. We are
Hmm.
called to share our faith, and so Christ invites us to testify to His works,
Hmm.
and that also includes the great work that He's done and is doing in us.
Hmm.
And so, first and foremost, just out of a humble obedience to our Lord Jesus,
Hmm.
He tells us to share.
Yeah.
He tells us to share our stories, and we see it all over the scriptures. Especially, there's a few points in the book of Acts where Saint Paul shares his story, and,
Hmm.
and and really does it in order to one kind of defend his faith um, before powerful people who kind of have the authority either to throw him in prison or to let him go, or to even sway the decisions of those that are listening. So Acts chapter 26, I don't know if we'll share a lot about that in here, but Acts chapter 26 kind of is a beautiful way in which we can see St. Paul kind of sharing the particular components of a good testimony, what life was
Mm-hmm.
like before, Christ encountered him, how he encountered Christ in a profound way, um,
Mm-hmm.
on the road to Damascus, what life has been like since encountering Jesus Christ. And then, like, honestly, an invitation to
Mm-hmm.
come and see yourself, an invitation to be open to the work of Christ in your heart.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think point number one is just Christ invites us to do it. And we see through the scriptures that it's an impactful way to share our faith.
Yeah.
Um,
That makes me think that, like, as a parent, when your kid's like, "Why do I have to do this?" and you say, "Because I say so," like maybe,
yeah,
maybe sometimes that is a logical reason,
yes,
that it's fine, or maybe it's
yes,
not for us, but it is for God. I don't know. We kind of talked about that this morning too, of like there's boundaries for us, but not for God. So,
right,
um,
right.
but
And
yeah.
maybe the next points are like the reasons why I think Christ does encourage us to share our testimony. And
Hmm.
the second one I'd say is human beings are wired for stories.
Yeah.
We all know this. You watch a
Hmm.
great movie and it impacts you. You can watch it once and it can stay with you for a long time. You can watch a movie or
Hmm.
read a good book or be told a good story, and it's if the elements included are concrete and they're accessible, and they kind of have this beautiful setting of the scene and the rising
Hmm.
action and the climax and the falling action. These things, if they're done well, really really resonate with human beings. We're wired
Hmm.
for stories.
Yeah.
And so with our own story, we want to kind of include those really concrete elements of what kind of person was I, prior to encountering Christ in a deeper way. And of course,
Hmm.
there's, everyone's story is unique. And
Hmm.
so some people from a very young age, kind of always knew the person of Jesus Christ, or were raised really well by parents who were really good at transmitting the faith to their kids. And so, some people might never remember a time where they didn't have Christ in their life.
Hmm.
Um, However, I think we can all, if we reflect and we pray and we ask the Lord to reveal to us, particular moments or even a moment in our life when things changed, when they shifted, when maybe Christ was part of our life and he became the
Hmm.
centerpiece of our life,
Yeah.
or maybe he was a big part of our life, and then the way that we lived and the way that we thought and the way that we treated
Hmm.
others began to reflect that he was the center.
Yeah.
And so human beings are wired for stories, and
Hmm.
obviously the greatest story of all time is the story of salvation, right?
Yeah.
Of God forming a people for himself, creating us for relationship.
Hmm.
um, Obviously the darkness of rebelling against God,
Hmm.
both in our first parents and um, our own personal sins along the way.
Hmm.
But then God sending his son, right, to redeem us, to draw us back to himself, to unite us again with not only the Trinity, but with one another,
Hmm.
recreating us in the Spirit, drawing us into his church, and then inviting us to respond to his love. And I think that, that kind of charismatic, that gospel story
Hmm.
is relived again in all of our lives.
Yeah.
If we look, right, if
Hmm.
we look, we can all probably say that, from a young age, even if I wasn't baptized, there was probably always this understanding in my heart or in my conscience of what's true and or at least what's good and what isn't.
Hmm.
Um, there's this way in which we sense that we're made for something important.
Hmm.
I think that there's a sense of God in every human being, right? We're
Hmm.
created in his image and likeness to know him and love him and
Yeah.
serve him. And I
Yeah.
think a really good testimony is a story within a story. It's
Hmm.
it's our own story, but it's also like Christ reliving his life in us.
Yeah.
And so I think maybe the second point is just Christ tells us to share a story because he knows that that's a really powerful way of teaching. He knows it's a
Yeah.
really um, it's a really impactful way of transmitting and communicating the mysteries of the kingdom, right? He always uses
Mm-hmm.
parables, like these
Yeah.
little short stories in order
Mm-hmm.
to teach a doctrine. And so I think,
Yeah.
yeah, I think for us, like our testimony is that it's some simple way of communicating a message,
Mm-hmm.
um, the message of what Christ has done in our own lives. And so that's
Yeah.
maybe my secondish point
Yeah.
of why we share testimonies is
Yeah.
because we know that our audience is wired for stories just like we are.
Yeah. I think
Impactful.
a tangent off that point too is kind of what we were talking about before we started recording. What is kind of that natural law, but yeah, but and also God making us his our we're his NIL athletes, so as I say, it made in us in his name, image, and likeness. So like it's imprinted on us,
Yeah.
and so that's why we find it in everything. I was thinking about
Yeah.
this the other day of like everyone's seeking God, even if they don't know it. Every atheist is seeking God. Every like Muslim, every
Yeah.
Jew, every Christian, Catholic, whatever, is seeking God, even if they don't know it or they're not actively doing it. Because every time you think to yourself, like, I'm not happy, like
Yeah.
I'm if I only made more money at work, or if I only could get a girlfriend, or if I only could get married, or I don't know, if I only had kids, or whatever it is, it's always
Right.
something. But then I even think about it in this of like, there's things in our lives that are like this will work for somebody. And so I come from the line of sales, and so
Yeah.
as a personal trainer and as I guess I won't say the company's name, but the multi-level marketing company I was part of, that was such a big part. It's like, you don't need to know everything about personal training, you don't need to know everything about all the products, because you're able to say, I don't know, but I'll find out that answer for you. But let me tell you on how I felt on the product. So let me tell you my
Yeah.
experience with working with the trainers here. And it was always so easy. Yeah, people are used to hearing stories. They want to hear, like, I mean, you could tell them facts all day. This will work because scientifically, blah, 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 and you lose them real fast.
Yeah.
Even though you're giving them facts of why this will work, why this exercise will help you get stronger. You're giving them the facts, but they're just like, okay, it's like, well, let me just tell you my story. I personally started using this exercise about 2 or 3 times a week, and I actually saw an increase. I was able to raise my max to this, and I felt stronger than ever. Then I found my running was better. I found, I'm telling this story about it,
Yeah.
and then you're obviously sharing it with enthusiasm and passion, because you're like this is like, yeah, I loved this so much. It worked for me so well that I want it to work for you, and so it's like, it is that. It's like we all like want to do it.
Yeah.
And you mentioned the movie thing too. I think about that. I mean, if you want to ask me about like, maybe not Wolverine and Deadpool, but any other Marvel movie, like the new Captain America coming up, like I'll sell
Absolutely.
you on it. Like I'll let you know, like this
Exactly.
is why. So this is what Marvel has done. Like for me, like it's just been so cool seeing this connection and blah blah blah. And like I can tell you
Oh
this
yeah, we do
whole,
it all the time. We do it all
yeah,
the time. Whether it's a
mm,
good restaurant that you had the best
mm,
steak of your life at,
yeah,
you're going to share that with everyone that following week, or
mm,
like you said, like if it's a diet that's actually worked for you,
yeah,
or a form of exercise, like
mm,
these things that we're bought into that have,
yeah,
in some senses, changed our lives, are
mm,
things that we um, want to share with others
yeah,
just naturally. And so,
yeah,
what more important thing
mm,
than the gospel,
yeah,
than the work of Christ in our lives? And it's kind of a good transition point that you kind of bring up, like. Um, Sometimes you can lose people in the science of things, but if you share
mm,
your experience, it resonates a little bit more. My
yeah,
third point is just like the testimony, sharing your testimony, evangelizing, at least beginning the process of evangelization
mm,
um, early on with the testimony is it's not confrontational.
mm,
It's our culture today, as we all know, matters such as faith can be really polarizing and
mm,
something that maybe a particular audience of people doesn't care to listen to, or once theology kind of gets into the mix, like walls go up, and
mm,
people either get defensive or angry or dismissive,
mm,
and those are all issues to maybe be more addressed as you form a deeper relationship with people down the road, and
mm,
and matters such as right doctrine are
mm,
need to be addressed. But I think early on, the beauty of a testimony is that it's pretty non-confrontational.
yeah, mm,
Maybe this is 2 points in one, but it's hard to argue with someone's story. You know,
mm, Yeah.
It's harder to be like, oh, I don't agree with that. I don't believe in that. Well, like you don't agree with my experience of what the
Hmm.
Lord has done in me and through me, and certainly people can still dismiss or
Hmm.
choose not to hear certain things, but I think the beautiful part about sharing your story, whether it's a short version or a long version or bits and
Hmm.
pieces along the way in your relationship with somebody, is it's just
Hmm.
like you can't you can't tell someone they didn't experience something that they experienced.
Yeah.
And so I think it has this way of kind of letting walls down. And
Hmm.
even if they're not sold, depending on who you're talking to, if it's a non-Christian or a non-Catholic or
Hmm.
whoever, it might take a lot longer for them to be sold on the doctrines and the core
Yeah.
truths of the faith. But I think it at least has this way of kind of um, disarming
Hmm.
people
Yeah.
to considering
Hmm.
Christ and His church.
Yeah.
So those are a couple more points I'd maybe
Yeah.
tackle on.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I was thinking of like reasons people wouldn't want to share their testimony, and I feel like
Mhm.
there were 2 points I thought of right off the top of my head kind of during this first part. But the first one being just like kind of like I said, we got John coming up next week, who's just got this powerful, like jaw dropping,
Yeah,
crazy testimony. And so sometimes that can make people like me say, like, I don't feel this way, but it can make someone like me feel like this. Like I don't have a story. Like I don't have a story that's going to change anybody or
yeah,
going to bring anybody to Christ.
yeah,
Yeah. What would you say if you've probably, no, you've definitely come across that. I feel like if you've been in college ministry for a while and then you've been
yeah,
in parish life now, I mean, you probably definitely talked to maybe some older guys or some young college kids. They're just like, I don't feel like my testimony though is nothing. Like it doesn't, I don't have any. I grew up in a great Catholic family. Now I'm Catholic and I plug into church. But it's like
yeah.
everyone's got it.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I think it is an insecurity in some people who are really living the faith well and
Hmm.
seeking to bring others into the fold.
Hmm.
That thanks be to God, they had either good parents or good role models or good schooling, good examples of from a young age where they maybe didn't fall as hard as some people fall. They maybe
Hmm.
didn't
Yeah.
find themselves in a state of significant habitual sin
Hmm.
that Christ had to really pull them out of.
Yeah.
Um, and I would say thanks be to God for that.
Hmm.
The less sin involved, the better.
Yeah.
And so to rejoice in the way that Christ has maybe protected them.
Hmm.
So maybe to start there is just like to,
Yeah.
you know, another thing about examining our stories and sharing our stories. It's this beautiful opportunity that we have as the sharer
Hmm.
to rejoice in the gifts of God and
Yeah.
what He's done. And so first and foremost, to glorify God
Hmm.
for maybe having a story where they didn't fall as hard or they
Yeah.
didn't go as prodigal as the prodigal son.
Yeah.
But then I think again to just really like in prayer examine the significant ways in which Christ did intervene,
Hmm.
because we don't all from a young age. What I say, there's conversion at such a deep level that goes
Hmm.
beyond just morality in the
Yeah.
Christian faith. I think when we think of conversion, we often think of I was sinning this hard and now I'm sinning a little bit less.
Hmm.
Thanks be
Yeah.
to God, and that's an element of it.
Hmm.
But I would also say that if we are really are um, saturating ourselves in prayer and in the scriptures and the life of the church and in Christian fellowship,
Hmm.
we should be able to find these points along the way
Hmm.
where where our mind was changed,
Yeah.
where we saw things one way and then we began to see them a different way,
Hmm.
where we began to what was preoccupying our thoughts, or the things that were preoccupying our thoughts began to be replaced by more transcendent things.
Hmm.
Um, and I think that those points are really important to pay attention to because,
Hmm.
again, it's Paul talks about be transformed by the renewal of your mind.
Hmm.
It's all over the epistles where a real authentic, deep, lifelong conversion is this ongoing transformation where we're kind of seeing with the lenses of the world, and then we're being converted to seeing with the lenses of Christ. And I think sharing things like that in our testimony
Mm-hmm.
are really important,
Yeah.
because I think, and if we can get good at sharing those things, I think the people listening to us
Mm-hmm.
will be very moved.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, hopefully, at the very least, the person that's sharing can see that, maybe I was saved from a life of deep sin,
Mm-hmm.
but the grace of the Holy Spirit has moved me from this point to this point, to this point, and
Mm-hmm.
that's something I can share, and that's something I
Yeah.
can share confidently in. And so that's just maybe one thought.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think everyone's story um, is unique and powerful, and
Mm-hmm.
again, if it's shared with enthusiasm and confidence,
Mm-hmm.
it has the ability to move hearts. It really
Yeah.
does. It doesn't have to be
Yeah.
something radically extreme like going from Satanism, to the
Yeah.
church.
Yeah.
Thanks be to God for those people that
Yeah.
are in those positions to share
Mm-hmm.
like that life changing
Yeah.
experience for those who might really need to hear it. But
Yeah.
yeah, those are some thoughts of mine on that.
Yeah. Yeah. And it makes me think of like, it's again kind of an example of the workplace kind of also imitating exactly what Jesus wants us to do. It's like my boss at Orange used to say, we got to get the right people on the bus. And everyone's like, yeah, I've heard that
Yeah,
term. But he took it a step further and goes, you got to get the right people in the right seats. So
yeah,
they may be on the bus, but if you got the wrong person managing and the wrong person coaching and the wrong person as sales associates when they need to be shuffled around, the bus is still going to crash. And so I was like, that's a really good concept. And I
yeah,
love that. Like, so Matt Fradd, I feel like super humble guy. And he's one that's very big on like, I don't do debates. I will moderate them and I want to be involved with them, but I don't do debates. I don't do it well. I can get angry. I can get anxious before. I was not put on this earth to do that.
yeah,
And he has people in his life though that were put on this earth to do that. The
yeah,
Trent Horns and the Carla Broussards, the Catholic Answers guys, and
yeah,
stuff like that. So he's got people like that, Jimmy Aiken.
yeah,
And so I think about that sometimes, where it's like, yeah, like we have these people that have gone from Satanists or atheists to now Catholic and super devout and very knowledgeable. Those converts typically tend to be like some of the most knowledgeable because they
yeah,
come to it at a late age and then they just become on fire and they can't get enough of it. And God uses those people for a reason. There's more people like you out there. But I always have to remind myself as someone who doesn't have I mean, struggle with stuff that a normal man does struggle with, and um, had a great Christian upbringing at least to a very very surface level. College and stuff, where I got from the 6 inch deep to like 1 foot deep, and so still super surface level. But nothing was ever so crazy. I think the biggest thing for me was like I was definitely that definition of like who Jesus said like, well, like I'll spit you out of my mouth, as those lukewarm
yeah,
Christians. It's like I'm a Christian, but it's like on Sundays I'll go to church, but the rest of the week I've got things to do. And
yeah,
so like I
yeah,
had to remind myself too, like it might not seem like I've had some major fall or anything, or I've been in trouble with the law, or have been on drugs, or been an alcoholic, or something like that. I've never had anything like that, and God bless those people that do have those problems and overcome them. But there are other people out there who are lukewarm Christians,
right,
and maybe they're still lukewarm Christians. It's like we need someone that can get out there and evangelize, because that Satanist that became a Catholic, they're just going to be like, oh, well, I mean, but I'm not you. Like I'm not. I
right,
wasn't that far. Like you've just taken it too far. You took it to one extreme, and now you're at the other extreme.
yeah,
They need people that are like, hey, I was just like you. Like I was living the college life, going drinking on the weekends, and focusing on my grades, focusing on my career. I got out of college and I focused on making money, making the most money I could, and hanging out with my friends, and the
yeah,
like not dating girls, and just this, it was more of a for fun stuff. And I was always seeking out something better. And then you're all of a sudden you realize like, man, my story that's not that powerful, or like I don't really have a story, is all of a sudden super powerful to someone. It's like, man, you're right. Like I've always grown up in a church and I just feel super empty. And
yeah,
I just like have to remind myself that there's people out there just like you, like exactly like you, that are in the
right,
same boat. Or I mean, they're in the same boat, but they're just like 4 or 5 steps back, and they need your help walking
That's
to
right.
where you got.
Yeah, people need to hear your story. Like particular people need to hear your particular story, and I
Hmm.
think of kind of to your point earlier, like many parts, one body, right? There's
Yeah.
the whole body encompasses the people like the Catholic Answers guys, Matt
Hmm.
Fradd, who are you know, sharing the faith in a particular way that particular people need to hear
Yeah.
from them. And then a lot of average Joes might need to hear our stories of a
Yeah.
little bit more average Joes. It's don't take it out of the Lord's hands
Hmm.
by not sharing your story. And
Yeah.
I think that's like we dismiss ourselves from the game. We take ourselves out of the game when we say,
Hmm.
I don't have anything to share, or I
Yeah.
don't have anything that's significant. It's like, yeah, no, the Lord wants you in the game. And
Hmm.
he knows your story and he knows the power of it. I mean, he's the co-creator of your story.
Hmm.
Um, and so, no, I think your point is fantastic. It's like you never know who is going to be the person that really needs to hear what you have to say,
Yeah.
who really needs to hear, um, again, what transformation has looked like in your life.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
uh, let's not use that as a cop out, right?
Yeah,
Um,
exactly. I think
so
that was good, kind of the first point. We maybe tagged on this a little bit, but the second point I was also thinking is someone may think to themselves, if I start sharing my story, people might start asking questions. They might start
yeah,
asking questions about the faith. If they want to ask questions about my story, great, I'll answer. But what if they start asking? I was like, well, I thought Catholics worship Mary. Like, I thought Catholics aren't this like idolatry and stuff. It's like, oh shoot, I don't know how to answer this. Like, I know it's not, but I don't really know how to answer this. Maybe I'm not ready to start sharing my story because people are going to start asking questions.
yeah,
And
that's a
my
great
thought on
question.
that was like, because that was one of my big things when I first became Catholic. I was like, I was Catholic, but I didn't want to get out there and just start like proclaiming it and like letting everybody know and all this stuff because I was afraid like they're gonna start asking me questions, and what if I don't know how to answer something? What if someone's smarter than me? And yeah, I was just like, man, I've got to figure this out. And it took me a while, but luckily now I'm blessed with, I guess we did tag on this a little bit with the right people on the bus, but in the right places. But just been blessed with people in my life that I'm like, if someone all of a sudden started answering me super theological questions, I'm like, that's a great question. I have no idea. But I definitely could help you figure it out. You can come to my work and meet Gerald or meet Father Porter,
Right.
Josiah in our group. But I feel like that's also another block for people of like I'll share my story. I'm just afraid people like ask questions.
Yeah. No, yeah, and hopefully they do. Like that. That's
Yeah.
I think it's an understandable hesitation um, because we can never know it all. Our
Hmm.
faith is so rich and deep and 2,000 years of tradition, and there's so much there that um, we can never be so prideful as to think that we know all of the answers perfectly for every circumstance.
Yeah.
Um, but hopefully people do start asking those kind of more questions regarding the teachings of
Hmm.
the church, and
Yeah.
so that's a motivation for us to learn our faith, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, as equipped evangelists, we don't need to be the Catholic answer guy that
Yeah.
knows every every verse for every teaching but we have to have a pretty good sense. We have to be growing in
Hmm.
our understanding of
Yeah.
our faith. We
Yeah.
want to be able to give a defense, right, to those who ask us for the hope that lies within us, like
Hmm.
Peter says, and that does entail, some level of rigor in studying our faith, and being familiar with the teachings proposed by the church and the catechism.
Hmm.
Obviously, being you know visiting with our Lord in the scriptures and having having um, maybe having on hand some of the questions that we know might come up often.
Yeah.
Questions about Mary and the saints, questions about the Eucharist and the Pope and the authority of the Church, and
Hmm.
these are kind of the maybe the hot button topics you might
Yeah.
consider them in the
Hmm.
in the Christian circles.
Yeah.
And so it's good to have some at least some basic understanding of those things. I don't think we need to understand them perfectly in order to share our testimonies,
Hmm. Yeah.
but we need to be working on it. you know.
Yeah. Hmm.
And so, yeah, that would be one thought. Is it just like, yeah, we do share our testimonies in order to get to more conversations about Christ and
Hmm.
about His
Yeah.
church, um, and so I think it's a good thing when people start asking. It's always a humble thing, like you said, of like,
Hmm.
shoot, I I don't have the best answer for that. I know someone
Yeah.
who does.
Yeah.
Can I introduce you to them? Or hey, you know, the Catholic Church has their teachings very accessible,
Hmm.
through the catechism or online. I could find that, and then we can get together for coffee, later
Yeah.
this week to
Hmm.
discuss those kinds of questions. And so, like, hopefully leaving that open door for another encounter,
Yeah.
with the person is really impactful.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, never being motivated by fear, right?
Yeah.
The
Hmm.
Lord is very clear on that.
Yeah.
And so, not letting ourselves give into those kind of fears and hesitations of what if they
Yeah.
ask a hard question.
Yeah.
Um, my thoughts
Yeah.
on that, I'd say.
Yeah, for sure. I always felt like it's been a good idea ever since I've like been working in ministry. Not only working in ministry has made me want a spiritual director, but like I feel like the more I get into like feeling called and like wanting to like share my story, I'm like, this would probably be a great time to have like a spiritual director, someone I meet with regularly,
Yeah.
because that could also be a tool where it's like, hey, I've been actually talking with a friend of mine, and they had some questions. I wasn't exactly sure how to answer it, and then they can walk you through that as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, but like always like keeping yourself like working internally first, and then like working out from there. Yeah, like you're saying, like if we're continuously growing and diving into the scriptures, and understanding the faith ourselves, then we'll just be more and more confident to talk about it. I've seen all the
That's
Marvel
right.
stuff, and I read all this stuff afterwards. So I'm always thinking of like people ask me all sorts of questions. I can explain it to you from all sorts of different directions, depending on how into it you are. Like, are we going to talk like a surface level? Or are you going to want to go deep into it? But if I would have only watched the movies, I wouldn't have known that. Like I had to dive deep. Like I did my research. I fell in love with it, and I started reading and started looking into other. There were theories, and I was able to discover like, okay, this theory doesn't make sense. It's not truth, and but you're able to find truth in this. And so that's what's great about having a resource like Catholic Answers is I feel
Yeah.
like you just
We're
have to like,
blessed.
yeah, like for myself, like I just had to figure out a way to like, how do I fall in love with my faith and like Jesus just as much as I love Marvel. Like if
Yeah.
there's a Marvel movie coming out today, but then or like this weekend, and I want to go, but then I get invited to like a retreat. Last minute, I get invited to a retreat. Like, would I be like, oh, cool, like I can go see the movie later. Like, I want to go on this retreat, or would I be like, ah, dang, like I've got that movie, and like, would it actually make me kind of go back and forth? And like, how do I fall in love with my faith as much as have fallen in love with like Marvel? Because I think the more you fall in love with it,
Yeah.
the more you grow deeper in an understanding and everything. I feel I mean, you're naturally going to fall in love with it even more. I found myself wanting to go to daily mass and going to confession at least monthly, and being
Yeah.
able like
Yeah.
you start participating in sacraments, then all of a sudden, yeah, you just kind of get, at least I did, get to this feeling of like, I guess this is my testimony about sharing my testimony, but like get to this feeling of like I want to tell people about this. I want to talk to people about this. I hope somebody asks me a question,
Yeah.
and then praying about it. God, if you have someone in mind today that you want me to share my story with or talk to about the faith, please put them in my path today or whatever.
Yeah. That's a great
Just
prayer, man.
something. Yeah.
Great prayer. Yeah. I mean, it's like anything else. Like the more we spend time with someone, the more we come to love them. Everyone's lovable, right?
Mm-hmm.
When you get down to it,
Mm-hmm.
and how much more Christ.
Yeah.
Christ is the most lovable person who's ever, I
Mm-hmm.
guess, who's ever lived, who's ever existed.
Yeah.
He's love himself, right? The Trinity is an exchange, a communion of love,
Mm-hmm.
and so we can, even if we're in a place where we're not yet, we don't feel that, we
Mm-hmm.
don't may have like the strong emotions towards that. We can reasonably, God has given us the great gift of reason. We can reasonably, and by the great gift of faith, know that Jesus Christ is the most lovable person that we have access to,
Yeah.
and
Mm-hmm.
therefore we ought to be spending quality time with Him daily throughout the
Yeah.
day. All throughout the day,
Mm-hmm.
coming back to Him, and obviously having prolonged periods of being with Him in adoration, in
Mm-hmm.
the scriptures. And so, you know, I don't want to say fake it till you make it, because
Mm-hmm.
I don't want that to come off as but in a sense it's like, okay,
Mm-hmm.
I know I should love Christ, and so therefore I don't love him as much as I know that I ought. And I think we'll be
Yeah.
saying that the rest of our lives if we're honest with ourselves.
Yeah.
But I know that I need to give him the time
Mm-hmm.
and to give him my heart and to
Yeah.
entrust myself to him, knowing that he is entrusting himself to me. And what I think is what I think is so amazing about our God is just he chose to reveal himself to us
Mm-hmm.
and to make himself knowable.
Yeah.
And he didn't have to do that. You know, he could have
Mm-hmm.
created us and saved us and,
Mm-hmm.
um, you know, even drawn us to heaven without really telling us who he is,
Yeah.
without really entrusting his very life and his essence
Mm-hmm.
to us.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you know, I can't remember which writer this was. Um, some priest, as they all tend to be, really good writers, but said something like the greatest gift, or among the greatest gifts of God, certainly that he chose to die on the cross for us
Mm-hmm.
and pay the ransom price for our sins. But another amazing act of love was simply that he revealed himself to us.
Yeah.
And did that, you know, throughout the Old Testament in kind of
Mm-hmm.
in particular ways, but then he unveiled everything in his son.
Mm-hmm.
And through the scriptures and through prayer and through the life and the teachings of the church, Christ reveals who he is to us.
Mm-hmm.
And that is such a tremendous reason to love him. I would say it kind of gets into maybe one of my final thoughts on testimony too is,
Mm-hmm.
um, I think Christ invites us to share our testimony because it's us entrusting ourselves to another person,
Mm-hmm.
which is a great act of love,
Yeah.
and a great act of vulnerability. Right? Like there's elements of our story, you know, depending on on our audience, we might decide not to share.
Mm-hmm.
But certainly with people that are becoming our friends,
Mm-hmm.
when we share the intimate parts of our life through our
Mm-hmm.
testimony, um, it it builds up trust. It builds
Mm-hmm.
up relationship. It shows the other person that I really care about you. I want to
Yeah.
share you. I want to share my story because I care about you.
Mm-hmm.
Not to do it in a coercive kind of way or a uh, blanking on the word. Pope Francis isn't a big fan of proselytizing. That's kind of the word I'm looking
Oh,
for. Like
yeah.
not proselytizing through our
Yeah.
story,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
but in a just a genuine, authentic, like, here's who I am, and here's what
Mm-hmm.
God has done in my life. And
Mm-hmm.
I think that that is a beautiful form of bonding with another person,
Yeah.
which is what we're trying to do when we're sharing our testimony, when we're sharing our faith. Like
Yeah.
the primary thing we have to offer somebody is an invitation to a loving relationship with Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
And um, as much as we're sharing that vocally, we ought to also
Mm-hmm.
be practicing that,
Yeah.
obviously through giving our lives over to other people, through self
Mm-hmm.
donation, through spending
Yeah.
time, but also in this form of like sharing our testimony really indicates to somebody like, I want to share a person with you, Jesus Christ, but I also want to
Mm-hmm.
share my very self.
Yeah.
I think it's First Thessalonians talks about you had become so dear. You know, it's Paul talking to the church in Thessalonica, and he's like, you have become so dear to us that we were ready to
Mm-hmm.
share with you not only the gospel of God, but also our very selves.
Yeah.
Um, and I think that that is what we're doing in a sense when we're sharing our testimonies. Like we're sharing Jesus, but I'm also sharing myself with you because
Mm-hmm.
I want to show you how much I love you, and I want to, through my imperfect love for you,
Mm-hmm.
show you how much Jesus' perfect love is being extended to you too. So
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think that that's another reason Christ invites us to share our story openly.
Yeah. Absolutely. Another point that like kind of relating it to the like worldly side of things is it's kind of like working out. Like you like if you haven't done it ever, you're obviously going to be super nervous to do it. Like you're not going to want to do it really. or maybe you do, but you don't even know how to start or whatever. Um, but no one's ever gone. I've always says no one in the history of working out ever has gone and done a workout and not sarcastically, but like literally said, "I wish I wouldn't have done that.
Yeah.
I wish I wouldn't have done that." And I feel like that's going to be the exact same thing. Now, I don't have. I'm definitely not going to sit here and say like I have all this experience of sharing my testimony because I don't. I've definitely shared it in front of a group at Christ the King. I've shared it with a couple people, but it's something that like I feel like I'm moving into a season of like this is like the time to start sharing it. And so when those nerves kick up, I always try to think about that. It's like no one's ever going to share their testimony and be like, I wish I wouldn't have done that. Like no matter how well or it goes, like the first time you do it, most likely it's not going to go the way you thought it was. Like if it's me, it's probably going to go 20 minutes longer than I thought it was going to. So yeah, but I always think about that. Like like relating it, and this is just my own personal, like how I relate things is obviously coming from the fitness industry. It's like, yeah, just like working out. Like you share your story. You're gonna be nervous. Yeah. You're not gonna want to. Maybe it'll go that far. Like you might not even want to, but you're never gonna share your story and then think to yourself, like, man, I wish I wouldn't have done that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I think to your point, it's like right. We form habits by consistent commitment over time.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and small kind of increases and or progressions, you know, towards what we hope to be, and I think that that's true. Like for any form of sharing the faith, we have to habitualize things, right? We have to put them into our schedule. We have to commit to them. I think with our testimony, it's similar. It's like, you know, we want to work on it from time to time, you know, kind of brush up on it. And in my experience, when I was a missionary on campus, I found myself my first maybe 1, 2, 3-ish years sharing my testimony like several times a day with students. Part of it was because I wasn't a very good evangelist yet, and I'm still growing, of course. But my testimony was kind of like that's the weapon I had, that's the tool I had, and so I would share that constantly. Because I was talking to people who I believe were going through very very similar experiences what I did when I was in their shoes, and so I'd share it all the time, and then you know as I kind of learned different elements of evangelization and moved into some different populations of people that I was talking with, I just shared it less, you know, or I'd share kind of like pieces of it instead of kind of a whole, you know, 5-minute thing, or 10-minute thing. But I noticed just like getting a little rusty, you know, like this is my story. I should be able to do this really easily. And the reality is like, no, I think the Lord is inviting me to return to reflection, right? I think as we progress and we age, you know, and especially as the veil is more and more lifted from our eyes, as we maybe come to greater degrees of freedom from sin, both the present and the past become more clear, right? We can see things now like we couldn't see them before. There's a real clarity as we come closer to our Lord that He gifts us with, and so I think you know the testimony that I share now, though it's not, you know, incongruent or false, like it's not different from what I would share maybe 7 years ago, 6 years ago. But there's things that the Lord has revealed along the way, that I maybe didn't see as clearly back then. And so I think from time to time, it is really a good thing to reassess, you know, what is maybe what's something that I neglected to share, or that I didn't place as much emphasis on in the past, that for whatever reason God is pointing out that I should share more now. It's so funny. The first time I was in college, and I think, you know, I'd just gone through this real depth of conversion at a conference, returning to the sacraments, to confession particularly, and kind of came back to campus in my last semester, and I was on fire.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to pursue Christ and pray, and I wanted to share about Him.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a guy that was really walking closely with me, still one of my best friends named Derek, and he started just walking with me and kind of sharing some mission skills, and one of those was sharing my testimony. And remember, he gave me this sheet of paper
Mm-hmm.
that kind of had like the four basic elements of a strong testimony, which is
Mm-hmm.
what was your life like before you encountered Christ? How did you encounter Christ? What's your life been like since you've encountered Christ? And then how can you maybe make a kind of invitation
Mm-hmm.
for the person listening? And it had like these boxes where I could write the stuff out.
Mm-hmm.
And my initial instinct was just to kind of be like, this seems a little silly,
Yeah.
this is my story. It's happened to me. I should know but I was faithful to his command, and I wrote out everything, and it really helped,
Mm-hmm.
like it really helped me kind of make concrete and just put the thoughts down that I think the Lord was really revealing.
Mm-hmm.
And so from time to time, I think it is a helpful thing maybe to even kind of write out,
Mm-hmm.
some of those elements of our story as we
Yeah.
follow.
Yeah, absolutely. What's funny is that reminds me again about personal training days, and we just said they would say grab like they may even use that word testimonies from your clients, like to ask them like
Right.
what did you like, where, how, what was life like before you start personal training, what was your experience like personal training, and how's it affected you now? And I was like, okay, cool. And so I'd have this collection of stories, and I'd have before and after pictures if they'd allow me, and then their story, and I'd literally like let them take this tiny little binder I had and flip through and see these stories. And it's like, oh, like
Yeah.
you want to lose 30 pounds here, like check out this lady. So she's one of my clients, and she here, and it had a short little testimony of exactly that. So it's like just the faith version of it. But yeah, that's what I was going to kind of say is maybe a good way to close before we do the Hallow app challenge is like, so now say someone's
Yes.
listening and they're just like, you're right. Like I need to be better at this. I need to be better at sharing my story. I want to share my story. But I don't really know where to start. What would you say? Like, I know kind of some people have recommended like almost kind of like an examination of conscience. Like it's an
Yeah.
examination of your testimony. It's like really go back and pray with God and reflect on your story. Like, where was God there in your story? Because I know for me,
Yeah.
like God was in my ear my whole life, but I didn't really know it until later on. And I really reflected back. And like, I always kind of had this feeling that there's got to be more. And I was like, oh wait, that'd be like, yeah, like God was in my ear, like telling me, it's like, hey, there's more to this. There's more.
Yeah.
Like there, and so obviously examining it, but like, what would you say for you? Like, if someone was like a new person at the parish, or like back in the day, a college student was like, I want to start sharing it more, but I don't know
Yeah.
what should I do.
Yeah. I'd start, I'd start in prayer, of course. And I
Mm-hmm.
think, I think that maybe even I just want to speak for a second. If anybody's listening
Mm-hmm.
and they're like, I don't, I don't know if I've encountered Christ
Mm-hmm.
in the way that you're kind of speaking about. Um, maybe I don't know if I've given my life over to him.
Mm-hmm.
He's inviting you to,
Mm-hmm.
and you can do that. Um, and you can do that right now. And I think, obviously as Catholics, like we believe that coming into the fullness of faith is more than just this one time kind of sinner's prayer.
Mm-hmm.
Um, like to be fully initiated into the ranks of the church entails
Mm-hmm.
being sacramentalized.
Yeah.
However, maybe you've been sacramentalized and you haven't actually made that commitment of faith, that kind of prayerful, real vocal submission
Mm-hmm.
of your life to Jesus Christ. And so I would invite you first, if that's you, um, to do that, to pray to
Mm-hmm.
the Lord and to tell him, Jesus, I want to give my life over to you. I thank you
Mm-hmm.
for the good work that you have accomplished on the cross for me.
Mm-hmm.
I thank you for the ways that you have always been right by my side. Um, and I consecrate myself to you. I consecrate my life to you.
Mm-hmm.
Not knowing exactly what that's going to mean for
Mm-hmm.
my future, um, but I trust you and I love you, and I want to give myself over to you.
Mm-hmm.
And you can make that prayer, and maybe it's a turning point in your
Yeah.
life. Who
Mm-hmm.
knows? Also, we should do that every day, even as
Mm-hmm.
Christians. Again, it's not a one-time thing. This
Yeah.
this is a
Mm-hmm.
this is a daily journey, an
Mm-hmm.
adventure that entails a daily commitment to Jesus Christ
Mm-hmm.
over and over again. And so, Josh and I will do that as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Um,
I was
but
thinking
I would say
The Lord's
beyond that,
Prayer.
like, yeah, I would say beyond that, don't overthink it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, just taking inventory of your life. I think it's good to maybe begin with the reflection of, okay, if I am one of those people that I'm confident that I've given my life over to Jesus, and that there's
Mm-hmm.
been kind of these hinge points or these turning points, or maybe a big turning point in my life.
Mm-hmm.
Um, assess who you were before that.
Mm-hmm.
What occupied your attention? Um, what kind of things did you devote your time to?
Mm-hmm.
Um, what would you say is like what was your top priority? Was
Mm-hmm.
it impressing other people?
Mm-hmm.
Um, was it getting good grades, or getting the best job, or financial security? Was it some kind of
Mm-hmm.
relationship um, that was not Jesus?
Yeah.
Kind of taking stock of like what really occupied my attention, my time, my passion.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Not that any of those particular things are bad, but if they're not subjugated to our King,
Mm-hmm.
then they might have been idolatrous. They might have been an
Mm-hmm.
idol. And so we all
Yeah.
have those idols. And I think
Mm-hmm.
what really marks a life before Christ
Mm-hmm.
is, what kind of idolatry was I involved in?
Yeah.
And so not overthinking it, just kind of, with our Lord, taking some time to consider those things in prayer.
Mm-hmm.
And then, yeah, what changed? How did Jesus come
Mm-hmm.
into my life? How did he sweep me off my feet? How did he surprise me?
Mm-hmm.
How did he reorient or reroute like my plans? And
Yeah.
maybe they weren't in these big ways,
Mm-hmm.
um, but what are what is the way, or what are the ways in which um, our Lord intervened?
Mm-hmm.
And again, don't overthink it. For me, it
Yeah.
was several things. It was in college. It was a guy sharing the good news of the gospel with me and inviting me to make a sinner's prayer. He's a Protestant
Mm-hmm.
beloved friend of mine,
Mm-hmm.
um, and I would say that kind of initiated a change of direction in my mind,
Yeah.
a kind of beginning of this transformation of mine, where I started to care about things in a different way, and kind of
Mm-hmm.
see things different, and I started to be more um, perceptive of my sin,
Mm-hmm.
and perceptive of the way that I talked about people.
Yeah.
Um, but it didn't alter my behavior
Mm-hmm.
consistently. I still struggled a lot with particular sins, but I began to recognize that those sins were not who I wanted to be,
Yeah.
and not who I was at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I was more than that. I was a beloved son of God,
Yeah.
not defined by my sins, but at the same time called beyond my sins.
Yeah.
And then there was another tinge point where someone invited me to a Bible study, and I started getting engaged,
Mm-hmm.
started engaging with holy friendships. And then
Yeah.
kind of a real big kicker was returning to confession at a
Mm-hmm.
conference. And so
Yeah.
like the grace of being like really reunited with the family of God
Mm-hmm.
through the graces of the sacrament, and divine life finally dwelling in me,
Mm-hmm.
allowed me to resist particular sins like I never
Yeah.
could before.
Yeah.
And it changed everything. But there was kind of like these like three-ish
Mm-hmm.
moments, and then there was a call to mission down the
Yeah.
road. But so don't overthink it. Just kind of
Mm-hmm.
consider, where did the Lord change things? Where did He
Yeah.
encounter me, and what was that like? And then what's things been like since?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and not to watch out is to one, either swing in the direction of like, I'm already a saint.
Mm-hmm.
No, you're not.
Yeah.
We're all
Mm-hmm.
works in progress.
Yeah.
Or to swing in the direction of like, I'm trying to follow Christ now, but I'm still such a rotten sinner, and
Mm-hmm.
I'm unworthy. Like, let's find the middle ground here,
Yeah.
where like, we're not perfect, but we're being perfected by the
Yeah.
grace of God. And so
Mm-hmm.
what's different? How do you look at the world differently? How do you spend your time differently? How
Mm-hmm.
do you pray differently?
Yeah.
And so I think assessing like just real generally, um, how does my life look different? Like, what has an encounter with Jesus Christ done for me, for my relationships,
Yeah.
for the way that I approach things?
Yeah.
And then I think like there can be some level of invitation, and
Hmm.
maybe not every time we're sharing our testimony are we making a strong,
Yeah.
invitation into the church or something. But
Yeah.
I tend to invite, people to consider, where has the Lord surprised you in your life? Maybe just
Yeah.
reflect on that.
Yeah.
Because if we are following the Spirit, we're not in charge.
Hmm.
And if we're really allowing Him to if we're cooperating with the grace of the Spirit, our lives are gonna they're gonna go in a different direction than maybe what we planned. I know that that's
Yeah.
true for me. I know that that's true for Josh in big
Hmm.
ways. Um, but that's maybe the invitation I often like to pose is just I invite you to consider how Christ has
Hmm.
um, redirected or reoriented your life and where He's surprised you, and then give
Yeah.
thanks. So those are my
Yeah.
yeah, just thoughts on where to begin. I hope that's helpful.
Yeah, yeah, that's awesome. And then I think the only one I would tack on is then kind of doing what we did this morning is then get with some people that you trust and know and like are walking with and like practice it
That's it.
with them. I honestly was weirdly like nervous to do it this morning, which was funny because I was like, I've done it before. I've done a talk on my testimony before. Like
Yeah.
I've done this stuff, but for some reason it was like more nervous. But I think
You
you,
did
when you
great.
just like in sales, like I do role play with my sales staff all the time when I was at Orange Theory, and they like made jokes about it, like, "Oh gosh, role play again." But it's funny because I would just come up with the most crazy scenarios, and I would send them through the ringer and put them through everything. Not saying that you should do that with the testimony, but just practicing it, just doing it. Like, hey, like find a friend that you go to church with or whatever. It's like,
Absolutely.
hey, do you mind if I like share my testimony with you and just like see what you think? Because then I think my other recommendation would be, because this is what I want to do for myself, is having like the elevator pitch one.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
that and that one has to lead into like, I'd love to get coffee sometime and tell you more, because it's obviously a lot deeper than that. Have your shorter form one because you don't want to just fire hydrant somebody,
Yeah.
but then have the long form one ready to go, because who knows when someone's like, I'm really considering this and I've really been thinking about this, but I don't know. And maybe they do want to hear your entire story. And you are going to have an hour and a half to sit down with them to tell your 30-minute testimony.
Yeah.
And then you guys converse for an hour.
Yeah.
But you never know who you're going to run into where you just have a couple minutes where it's like,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, this was me. Like before I was kind of living in this sinful life and struggling with X, Y, and Z. But I kind of found God through these couple things. And since it's been great. I mean, I've been focusing on whatever and just having that kind of brief
Yeah.
breakdown. I feel like you almost like could like write out your testimony and like bullet points first,
Yeah.
fill out those bullet points, and then the sub bullet points, and so you have like your whole thing. I feel like it takes some time because you're going to sit with God with it, and like I would do this almost in a chapel. Like do it during adoration, like writing out your testimony, and like invite God
Absolutely.
to the Holy Spirit to like write it for you through you. And having all those, because you want to be equipped and you want to be ready to go, and then you want to be excited to do it, because that's kind of where I feel
Yeah.
like I am now. Like I'm excited for like this upcoming school year is about to start in a few weeks, of like, I think I'm actually going to get out there and bare hand. Like my goal this year
Mhm.
for the students is I want to have a better relationship with the students and start doing stuff together, not just seeing them at events, but it's like, what are you doing? Let's go grab coffee real fast
Yeah.
and be better at that, because I know that, or what I felt like in my prayer time, is that God's saying you have a story and it'll reflect well with the students. And
Absolutely.
so, yeah,
No, I'm glad you mentioned those things. Definitely having some practice swings,
yeah,
with some people that
mm-hmm.
that already maybe know you, and maybe a little bit less of an overwhelming
Yeah,
circumstance, and to have the
yeah,
short term, the mid, the short version, the middle, the long. Those
yeah,
are great, man. Great points.
yeah,
Yeah, I think you're right.
absolutely. Well, guys, like I said, we're going to continue. This is kind of like almost like a 3-week series we're doing, because we got 2 guests coming up, like we mentioned, John Edwards, and then Amber Rose, for all you social media people, the religious hippie. She's awesome. She's got a great story as well. Don't know her story as well as John, so I'm excited to hear both of their testimonies and also talk with them about the power of testimony and how they have found such success, especially in this world that I'm in. This like trying to evangelize in the new age of technology. And so it's definitely not for everyone. I definitely would not encourage everyone like to just go out there and start trying to be an evangelist on social media. It's all about, at the end of the day, even for myself, for Matt Frad, for all the guys, like it's about relationship. You've got to build that relationship. That's where the foundation is, because the relationship will lead into your story, which will lead into hopefully their story, and they're trying to figure out what they're doing. But it's gonna be great. I can't wait to hear more about their stories and talk with them. And we're gonna go on now to a new segment. We're gonna skip the Saint draft this week. I know you guys love it, but we're gonna be going into the Hallow App Challenge. So I don't know if I need to mention this. I don't know much about YouTube guidelines or like business guidelines. I know it's nothing I'll get like the video get taken down or anything. Nothing like that. But like I feel like I've heard people say like this is not a paid, like they're not paying me to say this. I just love the Hallow app. I'm sure you use it, Branson, right? You
From time to time,
often.
my wife has it. We'll pull it up. I don't have it on my phone, unfortunately, but we use it. It's great.
It's great. It's a good like starting point. There's some stuff in here. I mean, they have one right here. They're doing a Divine Mercy Chaplet from July 29th, so it's already started, through August 4th to pray for France. We won't get into all that stuff, but yes, pray for France. But yeah, they got tons of stuff on here. They've got like for adults with special needs, the Litany of Trust, and they've just got a bunch of great prayers, meditative stuff. Anyway, one of my favorites though is the trivia, and we're gonna take it on now. It's here. It says daily trivia. Hit start. Once you hit it and you do start, it starts. You got 60 seconds to answer each question. So I'm going to read kind of fast and we're going to answer them.
Okay. Are we on a team?
Yeah. We're going to try to answer them together because you only can answer once. But we'll have to save like the talking about the questions for after. So for like, oh man, I was actually thinking it was talking about that, because it's going to go right from one to the next.
Go. Yeah. Good.
But 60 seconds is longer than I think we need, because I'll read them out loud, read all the questions. I always make the joke about one day Daniel McKay will be here and he'll be able to put the little like graphic here. Big news on that. He is joining the team soon. So I'm excited for that. He's going to be coming up with a whole bunch of media stuff for us. And so hopefully one day we'll be able to make this even better. But I'm not even going to worry about showing you guys. I'm just going to read the questions. We're going to answer it.
Is it a minute per question, or is it a minute for the whole thing? Okay.
No. 60 seconds per question. There's 5 questions. 5 questions. Right. My goals are always 3 out of 5. But we will see. We'll talk about it afterwards, and hopefully we'll do okay. If not, that's okay. Okay. So I always like to think though, it's like, what feast day is today? What is today? Now, yesterday was the Transfiguration.
It's like Sixtus the Second. Like it's not a very common.
So sometimes that's the kind of days where it's like they're going to ask some question about it. But you also had the Transfiguration yesterday, so we'll keep that in mind as well, because they may pull from that, since that was is that one a solemnity, whatever it is.
Transfiguration was yesterday. That was no, I don't think it's a solemnity.
No, okay,
feast. Just a feast.
Okay. Now, these typically get harder as they go, but all right, let's just go. This is our first go at this. This was literally thought of like 5 minutes before we started, so we'll see how this goes.
Might be really humbling.
We can always cut it if it's terrible. Here we go. No, we won't. We'll go raw footage. All right, start. Okay. All right, loading. Why is this not popping up? Where'd it go? Hold on. I had it there for a second, and then it didn't load. Oh, here we go. Okay, get ready. How many testaments are there in the Bible? Oh, it's an easy one. 2. 1, 2, 3, or 4? 2. Wow. Okay. No, this isn't usually not a good sign. All right, Catholic schools are also known as what? Parochial schools?
Parochial.
Okay, we don't even need to read. The rest of them are character, technical, or magnet. Definitely not magnet. Parochial schools. Oh, 2 for 2. Sweet. Which is not one of the 7 gifts of the Holy Spirit. I know it just because from seeing these: piety, knowledge, gentleness, fortitude.
Wait, say them again.
Piety, knowledge, gentleness, fortitude. Actually,
love, joy, peace. No, I'm sorry. Those are the fruits: wisdom, understanding, knowledge, counsel, fortitude, piety, fear of the Lord.
Oh, so it's gentleness. Oh, gentleness, because that's one of the fruits.
That's one of the fruits, yeah. Okay.
Oh, perfect. Okay, 3 for 3. Woo. I have a whole playlist where I try to get all 5 of them right. I haven't done it yet. Today is the feast day of which Catholic reformer and co-founder of Congregation of Clerics regular. Which one did you say it was?
So there's Sixtus II and Cajetan.
Oh,
Which one's on there?
Cajetan is, yeah. Elgius,
Cajetan.
Bernardino of Siena, and Saint Cajetan.
Cajetan is the one.
Whew.
Is that
So
right?
you guys gotta think about this ahead of time. We only got one more. On this day in 1420, construction began on the dome of the Cathedral of Santa Maria del Fiore, Florence Cathedral. This cathedral is commonly called what? The Tower, the Mansion, the Duomo, the Seat. Oh gosh, the Florence Cathedral. We got 40 seconds, so we
This
got
one's
time.
gonna have to probably be
I
a
think
shot in
again.
the dark.
Yeah. So if
Say,
it,
say him again.
all right, well, I'm going to read the question again too. We got 30 seconds. On this day in 1420, construction began on the dome of the Cathedral of Santa Maria del Fiore, or the Florence Cathedral. This cathedral is commonly called what? The Tower, the Mansion, the Duomo, or the Seat?
I want to like go to Duomo, but I don't know what that
I do
means.
too, because maybe it
This
means the
sounds cooler
dome.
than the other
Maybe it
ones.
means the dome.
Let's do it.
Yes, we got it. 5 for 5. All right. Hallow app, we will
Let's
take our
go.
prize. The address is in the description below. I'm just kidding. But yes, you guys check out the those
That's a
apps.
good start to that challenge, man. Well
Yeah,
done.
that was great. No,
That
but
was
that just puts
awesome.
pressure on. Maybe I will do that with John next week. Puts
There you
pressure
go.
on the next person. Well,
That
me
one was
too.
like pretty. Like I don't know if
Yeah.
I don't do many of those, but I wonder if that one would you consider that
So
one
that was pretty easy, especially
pretty easy?
like I haven't seen a question like that in a long time. Like how many testaments are in the Bible? It's like
Yeah, yeah.
that almost those are like that's that question that's so easy that it almost makes you like two. Like
I
am I
know, right?
am I
I was like, I
crazy?
mean,
Like
obviously old and
if
new, but
yeah, it's
is
like if
this
I
a
would have
trick question? Is there like
yeah.
a
So yeah, but typically like you'll have a week or a day like that. It's just daily. So you'll have a day like that, and then the next day it's just like it starts right out of the gate of like just some crazy fact about some like super obscure saint you've never heard of, and it's like what? Like what are you talking
to
about?
let you know that you know
Uh,
very little on
yeah,
this?
this one would probably be easier though with dual people because I definitely wouldn't have known the Saint one, the Saint Cajetan for sure. The Duomo, I was
Yeah,
kind of we were kind of on the same page, so I probably would have guessed that one right. I
yeah.
think you, yeah,
If I didn't get into the Magnificat this morning, I wouldn't have known the saint.
yeah, because I've never
But I
heard of that Saint ever.
briefly
But
read about Saint Cajetan this
yeah,
morning, so
yeah, for sure. So
there you go. Thank you, Jesus.
well, yeah, well, awesome. Well, you guys check out the Hallow app and comment below that they need to sponsor the podcast because that'd be awesome. We will Branch Bar see you in like a day, like Thursday.
Right, all
And
the
then
time.
yeah, and everybody else, we'll see you guys next week with John. And again, don't forget to like and subscribe and all that business. And also visit the link in our bio, which has like all of our Patreon stuff. So we'd love for you guys to be mission partners with the podcast, and you guys can support just a small monthly gift, help us grow the channel, update equipment, get even more guest speakers on, maybe even possibly do some live stuff as well. A lot of great stuff planned for the future to continue to grow the channel, to continue to reach more people. So yeah, it's all set up there, so you guys can visit that. Other than that, we will see you guys next time.
See y'all.